Hello. Welcome to Muslims in America Learning Launch for the Philanthropic Community. We have in the chat bar, check out the program agenda. We're also asking everyone to turn your video on and change your Zoom label to your name, organization. We also have custom Zoom background links available for you in the chat bar as well. There are some updates in terms of engagement norms here. To also review, this is a time for everyone to connect personally as Muslim leaders, allies, philanthropics, and there is a deeper need to build relationships and understand each other's stories for purposes beyond direct funding. So welcome, and we are actually going to kick off. I'm excited to welcome world-renowned jazz artist and American Muslim Tammy McCann Simpkins, and vocalist and pianist Kenny Davis. And so welcome. So we can say hello to Tammy.
Thank you so much. Again, my name is Tammy McCann Simpkins, and on piano is Mr. Kenneth Davis. The Illinois Muslim Civic Coalition and its partners have a vision for America and a vision for society, where we partner together, and create a space and a world where we all can live and thrive and create loving, supportive partnerships with each other. I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom for me and you. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I see skies of blue and clouds of white, the bright blessed days, the dark sacred night, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. The colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the sky, are also on the faces of people going by. I see friends holding hands, saying, how do you do? They're really saying, I love you. I hear babies cry, I watch them grow. They'll learn much more than I'll ever know. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the sky, are also on the faces of people going by. I see friends shaking hands, saying, how do you do? All they're really saying is, I love you. I hear babies cry, I watch them grow. They'll learn much more than we'll ever know. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Yes, I think to myself, what a wonderful world.
Thank you, Tammy. Thank you. That's wonderful. Okay.
Good day, everyone. I'm Anne Marie St. Germain, daughter of John, who was born Beguajanini on the Lac de Flambeau Reservation in far northern Wisconsin. Today, we gather in a virtual event, not in the same physical space, yet we remain joined by the common goals we share of equity and prosperity, of understanding and respect. Today, we acknowledge Chicago and its environs occupy the traditional lands of Indigenous peoples who have lived on these lands for 10,000 years. They are the Three Fires people, the Ojibwe, the Odawa, the Potawatomi. We further acknowledge Ho-Chunk, Sauk, Fox, and Kickapoo. Today, in fact, Illinois is home to members of 150 different tribes. We have a collective responsibility to do right by Indigenous peoples, beginning with acknowledging the origins and history of these lands, but not ending there. Now let us reflect in the words of a prominent chief who has left the physical world. Your path. Everything is laid out for you. Your path is straight ahead of you. Sometimes it is invisible, but it is there. You may not know where it's going, but you have to follow that path. It is the path to the Creator. It is the path to doing good for others. It is the only path there is. My work is in public policy, advocacy, and coalition building. I'm also privileged to serve as Vice Chair of Woods Fund Chicago. So one way or another, I'm in this work every day in communities across the city and the region, well, mostly virtually these days. Together, I'm confident we can travel a path of meaningful, sustainable change. That's what today is about for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne Marie. Okay, I'd like to welcome our unity prayer. I am looking for it. Come on. Oh, there we go. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. May God's peace be with you. I greet you in peace. Assalamu alaikum. We will open the prayer with the opening chapter of the Quran, Al-Fatiha, which it means the opening because we're at the very beginning of what we hope to be a lasting and fruitful relationship. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. It translates, with God's name, the merciful benefactor, the merciful redeemer, All praise and thanks be to God, the Lord, cherisher, sustainer, the nourisher of all the systems of knowledge, the most gracious, most compassionate, sole judge in the day of judgment. You alone do we serve, and you alone do we seek assistance. Guide us all upon the way that is straight, the way that it incurs your favor, not your wrath, nor let us be among those who are astray. Amen.
And now we're going to have a second part with Tammy McCann, our world-renowned jazz vocalist, African-American powerhouse, and African-American Muslim, following Imam Makram. Thank you, Imam.
This next song is what needs to accompany our vision for a better world, is to really enact the changes that we want to see. I was born by the river in a little tent. Oh, just like the river, I've been running ever since. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change gonna come. Yes, it will. It's been too hard living, but I'm afraid to die. 'Cause I don't know what's up there beyond the sky. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change gonna come. Yes, it will. Now I go to the movie and I go downtown. Right now, today, somebody keeps telling me, don't hang around. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change gonna come. Yes, it will. So I go to my brother. I say, brother, help me please. But he winds up knocking me back down on my knees. Oh, there's been times I thought I couldn't last for long. But I know that I'm able to carry on. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change gonna come. Yes, it will. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change gonna come. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change gonna come. Oh, yes, it will.
Assalamu alaikum, peace and
Thank you so
blessing.
much.
My name is Dilnaz Waraj, and I'm one of the conveners for the Year of Learning. Thank you, Anne-Marie Saint Germain and Imam Makram Al-Amin for grounding us spiritually. Thank you so much to our vocalist, Tammy McCain Simpkins, and pianist, Kenny Davis. You have given us the deep history of Muslims that were brought to America over 400 years ago, and the music of Sam Cooke that continues to give us hope for that change gonna come. Thank you so much. We are in a time when we can build a more equal America together. As my Indian parents and my Pakistani in-laws saw America as an idea of mobility and for a better life for their children, I come to you today with the identities as a female, an immigrant, a Muslim, and a person with much hope. Racism and Islamophobia are no longer an ideal, a denial in our country. And the first step to combat that problem is proximity. So today we are honored to have you virtually present with a full agenda of a cultural immersion of building relationships with our Muslim American communities. So over the past few years, the Raj Family Fund, with its place-based, faith-inspired philanthropy, believes in the transformational power of stories. We have used our philanthropic arm to uplift Muslim-led initiatives from seminaries to higher ed institutions and direct services. We strategically look for organizations and initiatives that are transparent and collaborate, such as the Community Collaboration Initiative and now the Year of Learning. As I spoke to many foundation leaders and influencers over the years, I've realized that there was a lack of relationship building and a baseline understanding for the Muslim American communities. Every day with urgency and resiliency, Muslim Americans inspire me as they continue to build this equal America for all. This event could not have happened without our conveners, our sponsors, our partners, and our robust planning committee, who are all located on our website. Take some time and explore the website to better understand this year of learning. This event truly was a labor of love, and thank you to each one of you for your leadership. Now I turn the virtual floor over to Hilish Patel, our convener from Field Foundation.
Thank you, Dilnaz. So I'm happy to be here representing not just Field Foundation, but also to represent myself as an ally. And Dilnaz kept using the word build, and I've been thinking about that a lot. As this has been coming together, as this is being convened today, what does building mean? And what does it mean to create an architecture? And I know that we're all here via Zoom right now, but there's really all the planning committee and all the conveners have built this space. And I want to start off with a quote from Sarah Ishikawa and Christopher Alexander. When you build a thing, you cannot merely build that thing in isolation, but must also repair the world around it and within it, so that the larger world that at that one place becomes more coherent and more whole. And the thing which you make takes its place in the web of nature as you make it. I think about this and I think about Miriam Kaba's assertion that anything done worthwhile is done with other people. And a lot of questions are going to come up today, and I hope you leave with as many takeaways as you do with questions. What does it mean to be in relationship with each other? What does support really look like? What don't you know? What do you want to know? What are your gaps? What are your blind spots? This space, this day is a way to foster civic collaboration, civic partnership with a community that is hugely complex. There is no single story narrative with this community. And I think one of the things that we're thinking about today in terms of civic collaboration and civic partnership is, what does that look like? So as you go through today and as you receive lots of information, but also as you see doors open into new pathways and relationships, I'm just happy that you're here, and I hope that it offers you a glimpse into this complex community.
Sayed.
Peace, salam, good afternoon, my friends. This is my mom, Alim, my daughter, Mariam, and I'm Dilara Saeed, co-founder of the Illinois Muslim Civic Coalition. When Hilesh, Dilnaz, Ruhi, Rima, Norma, and I, as conveners, we got together, we first started with sharing our own individual stories as we began visioning what today would look like months ago. Stories that I know we shared mirror many of yours. Moments in our childhoods when we felt like the other. Moments when we knew our neighbors and classmates saw us as the other. And then moments when we absolutely felt like we belonged and we were part of something greater. As adults, women, people of color, people of faith, or people with accents sitting in a room after room, we often represented a community. We were the voice for residents, not in those rooms yet. But here we are. None of us is alone, not anymore. All of us are together and we're building towards a greater together. This is a critical moment in our history as Americans, a moment when we are facing the mirror and making change, as Tammy sang to it and Dilnaz and Hilesh spoke to it. So every child, woman, family, community in America is safe, seen, heard, and included. This is why we all came together today. Whew. Take a deep breath with me. Over 400 registrants today, hundreds of faces on Zoom right now, engaged, learning, impacting change towards 3 outcomes today. 1, education and understanding of each other and of ourselves collectively as Americans. 2, action towards change, true meaningful change in philanthropy, in government, in communities. And 3, a long-term impact that is measurable. And we will sit just a short time from now, hopefully, and say, this is exactly what we were hoping would happen. Today is a 4-part experience. See the diagram in the chat that shows you part 1, learning about American Muslims. Part 2, what does success look like? Part 3, having a cultural experience. And part 4, building one-on-one relationships. So let's get to it, shall we? As a former 8th grade teacher, I invite you to learn with us in part 1, education and sharing our American Muslim stories and our American stories with Petra El-Sufi from ISPU, the Institute of Social Policy and Understanding.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. As Dilara and Naz mentioned, my name is Petra El-Sufi, and I am with the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding. And we are a research and education institution that research American Muslims and issues that impact them, with the goal or with the aim to build understanding between people and safeguard American pluralism. So it is my pleasure today to briefly introduce to you, I think what Hilesh mentioned, that this is the most diverse and unique faith community in the nation. I will be sharing with you who are American Muslims, what the diversity of the American Muslim community look like in all aspects of the story, some of the challenges that we face, and I emphasize the word some, and then even the perseverance even with those challenges. So the American Muslim community, as I mentioned, is a very diverse community. It's the most ethnically diverse community here. We do not only look like what America is today, but what it would look like in the future. No faith community matches the diversity of American Muslims. It is also a very young community that is the future of this nation, showing that a large segment of the American Muslim community are between the ages of 18 and 24, representing the opportunities that this nation is having in the future in terms of job opportunities, inventions, in what this nation will be looking like. Half of American Muslims are native born and the other half are born overseas, but 86% of American Muslims are American either by birth or naturalization. And that's a very interesting, identity because it shows you the connection to all parts of the world American Muslims have. One of the interesting topics, or the topics that's often asked about, is Muslim women. And two of our speakers so far mentioned their identity as Muslim women. And you'll see here Muslim women are often talked about, but not in the right way or in the facts that research show, which include the American Muslim women are among the most highly educated women in the nation, and they surpass Muslim men. And they represent a diversity of how they choose to represent themselves, or how they dress, or what careers to have, what issues they address. One of the issues I'm going to bring up here very quickly, again, something that's often asked about, is that of the dress code. You'll see 50% of American Muslim women choose to wear the headscarf or the hijab. The other 50 does not. And among those who do, they indicate that religious obligation to please God and piety are the top reason. And only 1%, which is contradicting the misconception that's out there, are required by a parent or someone in their life. That's similar to the Protestant community, but it's way lower than Jewish, Catholic, or white evangelical women. American Muslims are often asked about their faith identity in their Americanness. And you'll see the research show that a strong faith identity supports a strong American identity. There is no contradiction between the two. As a matter of fact, they support each other. And the opposite is true. And American Muslims view their faith as a source of happiness and a source of inspiration for the things they do. For example, given outside of their faith community, or philanthropy. And one of the issues that American Muslims give to at a large percentage is elevating domestic poverty causes. And that's a very clear example in what's going on in Texas in the last couple of days. What issues do American Muslims care about, or choose their political leaders based on? And you'll see here the top issues: healthcare, Medicare, economy and jobs, and social justice issues. Those are very similar to other faith communities, and they're not per se Muslim issues. But as I mentioned earlier, American Muslims are faced with a lot of obstacles and challenges. They face religious discrimination at a higher percentage than other faith communities. Our research showed that over the last 5 years, 60% of American Muslims say they have experienced religious-based discrimination. And you'll see here they experience it at a higher percentage than other faith communities or the general public at an institutional level, including 25% while receiving healthcare. Think of that in the middle of a pandemic. And then, of course, at an interpersonal level. American Muslim children are also faced with religious-based bullying. In 1 out of 3 cases, it's at the hands of adults or administrators in the school system. Why is this important to bring out? Because we're talking about opportunities, we're talking about challenges of a faith community that's highly young, that's very young, and that's highly diverse. And that's representing an aspect of our future. But with all of this, American Muslims are persevering, and they're using their faith as a motivation to give back. I'm going to highlight 2 examples: New York City, where 9% of the population are Muslim, and Michigan, where 2.7% of the population are Muslim. And they represent a disproportionate percentage or number in the healthcare field, or in some of the other careers. For example, 15% of Michigan doctors are Muslims. Again, think of that in the context of COVID-19 or a global pandemic. What would Michigan look like without its Muslim medical professionals? What would New York City look like without its Muslim medical professionals, or even its taxi drivers? 40% of the taxi drivers in New York City. COVID-19 hit the nation about a year ago, hit the world about a year ago, and we launched a project to see how are American Muslims responding. And you'll see from this interactive map on our website, they're really answering the call and the need in almost every community across the nation. And again, look at what's going on in Texas over the last 3 days or the last couple of days, and how American Muslims are responding to what's going on in Texas. Finally, I'm going to highlight 2 examples of individuals that we have collected their stories, but of course, there's so many more on our website that you could see those stories available on our website and much more research. The first one is Nicole Nejma Ibrahim, who is a poet. She's a fashion photographer. She's a storyteller. She designed, or she came up with a project, a storytelling project, again, because Muslim women are often talked about but not included in the conversation. And her project is I Am More Than a Scarf, highlighting Muslim women in their stories, in their experiences. And the last example is Yahya Basha, who's a radiologist here in Michigan. He's a businessman, he's an entrepreneur. He's the founder of Basha Diagnostics. In the 70s, he was facing some issues starting his career in some of the hospitals. So he took the advice of his Jewish colleagues to start his own radiology independent clinics where hospitals and patients are going to him. He's not going to them. Finally, it is good to know and good to see that most Americans want to live in a country where no one is targeted for their religious identity. And those are just some of the stories that I shared about American Muslims, but there is ton more research on our website. Thank you so much for giving me the time.
Thank you, Petra, for the compelling stories that the research data shows us. My name is Ruhi Yunus, and I'm the program manager and a facilitator for the Community Collaboration Initiative. I am also one of today's conveners. We are off to an amazing launch with hundreds of people joining us today. It is heartening, and we have more to do. Now you have seen a snapshot of our community. We are Black, white, brown, and tan. We are medical professionals, Uber drivers, educators, civic leaders, and more. We're a young native-born community. We care about healthcare, the economy, and social justice. From this timeline, you'll see Muslims have been a part of the American story for at least 400 years, beginning with the transatlantic slave trade. We will begin one of 3 breakout sessions in a moment. Tell your story and how it intersects with this timeline. For example, my story begins with my father's arrival to Chicago in 1972 as a single student from Karachi, Pakistan. While a student, he worked to send money back home, so they too were included in the American dream. Growing up, our home was Ellis Island, with newly immigrated aunts and uncles disembarking there. My mother worked full-time and created a welcoming home for everyone. Now, my son is a proud, confident, aware child because of those sacrifices. My family is flourishing because of the Immigration Act of 1965. I look forward to hearing about Bree, who was born in Cebu, Philippines, and is Scottish, Norwegian, Irish, and Swedish, and Adina, whose family immigrated from Bosnia and was born in Austria. All our American stories intersect at some point. Where does your story begin in America? How does it intersect with the Muslim Americans of that time and of today?
All right, thank you, and welcome back, everyone. My name is Arshia Ali Khan, and I have the honor of being your moderator for the second session. At this time, I'd like for all of you to reflect, take one brief moment to reflect on what this morning has meant for you. I think there's supposed to be a prompt on the screen as well to help support you through this reflection. Norma, I don't see the prompt. Is that me or should we just?
Prompts in the chat.
In the
How
chat.
did telling our stories this afternoon impact you? So please add to the chat any inspirational story, any story you wanted to share that somebody else shared today with you.
My apologies and thank you, Delara. She has all of our backs. So with that, I'd like to welcome you all again. Assalamu alaikum and greetings of peace. My name is Arshia Ali Khan. I am a board member at the Illinois Muslim Civic Coalition, leading development, and I am the interim CEO at the Muslim Legal Fund of America. Our mission at MLFA is to advance equality and justice for American Muslim organizations and individuals by promoting legal compliance and protecting their rights in matters concerning national security law. Before we begin our part two, let's recap the 3 goals for this learning launch. Why are we here today and what are we all committing to? We are here seeking education for understanding. We are here to identify actions towards change. And we are here to build long-term, sustainable, intentional impact. So welcome again, and thank you for being with us here today. Session 2, our goal is to lay a foundation of what success looks like when a funder or a government agency partners with an American Muslim community. What does that look like? We will examine the impact we have made and the challenges we aim to overcome together. I believe the planning committee chose me to moderate this session because making a good difference in the world and leaving a legacy are my operating principles. We can't do that, however, until or unless we define what success looks like, what good looks like, what positive looks like, what growth looks like, what inclusive looks like. Okay, forget looks like. What does it feel like? How do you experience it? How do you know that change is being made in the right direction? So with that, let's begin. I'll start with brief introductions of my esteemed panelists. Please note, these introductions will not do them justice. Their full bios and links will be in the chat, so please do take the time to get to know them and their work. We have with us this afternoon, Monique Jones, President and CEO of Forefront. Monique is a visionary leader with an extensive background in mental health, violence prevention, philanthropy, and gender and racial equity. With over 20 years of experience in her career, her civic interest spans in the intersection where the lives of those most vulnerable fall victim to structural oppression. Welcome, Monique. Daniel Ash, Associate Vice President of the Community Impact at Chicago Community Trust. He is responsible for building collective power strategy, which aims to advance equitable, livable, and resilient neighborhoods within underinvested Black and Latinx communities. Welcome, Daniel. We have Nirman Taha, co-founder of Arab American Family Services. Arab American Family Services provides access and effective social services to communities in the Chicagoland area and is committed to empowering, educating, and supporting individuals and organizations to foster and enhance economic well-being for Arab Americans. We have Jawad Rahman, Director of Development and Executive Producer at Unity Productions Foundation. Jawad's work at UFP includes Emmy-nominated Sultan of the Saint, and also he's consulted in numerous scripted series in Hollywood and overseas development efforts at UFP. And last but not least, Muhammad Gula from Engage USA. Muhammad is a national organizing director and executive director of Engage's Virginia chapter. He developed a strong sense of devotion for the nonprofit sector, shadowing his father as a preteen, sponsoring over 200 refugee families from around the world. He is an advocate for youth empowerment, human rights, social justice, diversity, and inclusion. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for being here. And again, their full links are in the chat for you. I'd like to start this afternoon's discussion with an opening question for all of you. I'd like us to have some fun, and I'd like this to be a conversation. So you guys can all get off of mute and popcorn and just be with us. The first question that I ask, and I would love to hear from every single one of you, is within 1 minute, share with us a breakthrough or positive moment you have had with a funder and the impact your organization was able to achieve with this win. You can do funder and fundee, so.
I'll start. I've been on both sides of the spectrum, so now I'm a PSO, but I was a funder, and prior to that, I was a nonprofit organization. And during COVID, as a funder last year, the most successful moments were being able to stand face to face with my brothers and sisters, understanding that we were all being impacted by COVID, and that seeing people as myself was my pride and joy. You are my brother, you are my sister. What I'm doing to help you helps me, and vice versa. So that was like, if I had not done any more work past then, that would have been the great moment to realize that we are each other's sisters and brothers keeper.
I love that.
I guess I'll go next. Jawad Abdurrahman. It's actually UPF.
Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. In fact, you know, sometimes people say, do you work for UPS or do you work for FedEx? And so I just say FedEx.
You know, I had that moment. I was like, I think I said it wrong, but I apologize and thank you for the correction.
So, okay, so, you know, it's good to talk about success stories because when you're, I know mostly people tuning in are nonprofits, and it's very challenging to get the attention of foundations to raise money from foundations. So I'll share a quick one. We had done a screening of one of our films in Jacksonville, Florida a few years ago, and we met the president of the then president, Nancy Cable of the Arthur Vining Davis Foundations. This led to an in-person meeting where we talked about our Sultan and the Saint film. This is a story of Muslim-Christian peacemaking. And the reason why the relationship ended up working and we ended up getting funding was because there was a meeting of the minds, and they saw that this was really about aspiring to something, aspiring to some social good in the world. It wasn't just art for art's sake, and that's what they cared about as well, and that has led to subsequent grants, including for our new film that we're working on about Rumi and a Syrian refugee. So that's a quick success story.
Thank you, Jawad.
I'll go, Arshia. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I'm excited to see so many beautiful faces this afternoon. For me personally, one of my favorite successes, and alhamdulillah, we've had so many, but one really sticks out, is that what funders don't know about me and I'tidal is that when you tell us no, we never leave. We know where you live. We know your address. We know your, yeah, pretty much, you know, we can find out.
You're scaring me, Norma, stop.
But I think our success comes from determination and never take no. For anyone listening, is never, just because someone tells you no does not mean that it's a never ending no. And one of our funders, recent funders, I think we're so persistent and we kept a relationship and we never gave up for so many years until they came around and said, you know what, they've been loud and clear and that their community does exist. And so those are my successes, is knowing that no doesn't mean no. Stay after them.
Persistence and perseverance. I hear you. I've done that many times.
I'll share a recent sort of success. So a few weeks back on CBS Morning News, they featured a project based here in Chicago called the Folded Map. And it's a project that was created by a sort of young sort of civic agitator, if you will, named Tanika Johnson. Going back about 5 years ago, she approached me with this idea. She didn't have an institution, she didn't have an organization, she was just an individual in our community trying to create an initiative that would connect people who are otherwise disconnected in the city. I listened to the idea and I said, yeah, we should do that. and I wasn't even in the grant making division at the time. I was at the time chief marketing officer, and I helped find a way to get her $25,000 to start a project that is now known most certainly nationwide and to some extent globally. And then it's a project that connects people who wouldn't otherwise connect, and allows those people to get to know one another. So it gave me sort of great pleasure to be the person helping philanthropy take on the risk, or not see risk when they were seeing risk, and actually see opportunity.
Thank you, Daniel. I mean, I really appreciate that allyship. And it's really important, I believe, when somebody sees you, because you don't always see yourself, especially when you felt like you're marginalized or you're kind of sitting in a bucket. It's really important for allies to see you, as Monique was saying, just eye to eye, brother to sister, we have each other. So thank you for that share. Muhammad Gullah had to leave us. I think he'll be joining us back. So we're just going to continue our discussion. And again, I don't want this to be me ask you guys a question one-on-one. So just let's have a conversation. Let's talk about these issues. An important question that I thought was identifying some barriers. So we want to look at what does success mean. So let's look at what barriers we faced. So the question I have for you is, what barriers have you experienced, and what would you like a funding organization to know about the American Muslim organizations?
So Arshia, just two things have come up in the course of a number of meetings with foundations. One is that I've talked to grant foundation officers who said, oh, the American Muslim community is just such a mystery. We just have no idea. If we only understood it. And then secondly, I've heard some foundation officers say, well, I know something about Muslims, but you don't all share the same strategy. Your nonprofits don't all share the same strategy. Well, these are excuses. I mean, two civil rights organizations, no two environmental organizations share the same strategy, and American Muslim organizations don't share the same strategy as well. And as far as the first point, sort of foundations that get it kind of know what they know, but they also know what they don't know. And when they make a commitment to learn and understand, there are opportunities to learn like this one. So I see this changing. I think there is definitely more awareness, but these are two sort of obstacles that we've encountered, at least.
Thank you, Jawad. Let's hear from a couple more of you. And Monique, I know this is a question asking about, but it would be great to kind of hear the other perspective, because I do believe there's barriers on both sides. And I think Jawad helped us identify that.
Sure. So for us, Arshia, speaking from Arab American Family Services, several challenges come in mind. So over the years, we've had early on and started establishing Arab American Family Services. We still get this, but not as much, because we made it loud and clear that we exist. But so many funders didn't think or know that Arab Americans existed. So we were the invisible community. And for that, so many foundations and funders would not support, because again, we were lumped under white. And so having the MENA category for us is critical. For those of you who don't know, so Arab Americans are labeled white under the census. So, and a lot of funders and a lot of foundations and government grants abide by that when they're issuing funds. So that was a huge issue for us. It was a constant battle to really bring that point and to clear it and to make them understand that there's a large, significant Arab American, Muslim American community. And I heard ISPU talk about the model minority, which is, as Muslims, we talked about having the doctors, we talked about the educated, we talked about achievers. But we have to remember that so many of our communities, as Muslim American communities, we have the poverty, we have unemployment, we have low income families, we have struggling families, we have parents who are not able to put their kids through education. So I don't want to lose sight of that. The reality is many of our families, especially during COVID as an organization, we assist so many families with rental assistance and so many other basic human needs. And so the reality is, while yes, we have the high achievers and the educated, but there's a growing population in our Muslim American community and Arab American community that are struggling to meet their basic human needs. And so I want to keep that front and forward for all of us to keep in mind. And so that's why I truly passionately believe that when we're talking to funders, yes, I love that picture of who, that part of our community, but the reality is there are many of our families who are struggling. So the MENA being white are struggling community issues, but also at the end of the day is, one funder, and I'll never forget this, going back to Jawad's point, one funder had told us one time, well, how do we know that by funding you, we're not funding terrorist organizations? And so these are really true conversations that we struggle with as Arab American and as Muslim organizations. And I think we have to be real to ourselves and to communities that we're talking to. And again, I can talk forever and I don't want to take up.
No, I mean, I appreciate, Nirman, what you're saying. And I think all of us, have been on that side as American Muslims and American Muslim nonprofits. I know I have, I've been called a lot of names, and it's really great that we're having this conversation so we can, share what our struggles are, which is what this question is about. So Muhammad, welcome back. Thank you for being here. We're on a question regarding barriers. So did you want to jump in and talk about some barriers that you've experienced when approaching funding organizations?
Hey, assalamu alaikum. Yeah, thank you. And I see a lot of familiar, beautiful faces and names. So I'm humbled to be amongst some of the best, alhamdulillah. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Muhammad Gula. Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest, really operating in the organizing space and in the political organizing space, one of the biggest, I think, barriers is that a lot of funders really focus on the specific activities. So for example, phone banking or door knocking or sending out a certain number of text messages. And so what ends up happening, especially with minority communities, is that minority communities, what they're trying to do, especially in the Muslim space, is that we're trying to build institutional capacity. And so when our main focus is building institutional capacity, but a lot of funders are focusing on a lot of the activities to get from point A to point B on specific goals, or they'd want us to work in coalition with others. And a lot of times that kind of drowns out our voices or our policy issues. And so you'll find this kind of chicken or egg kind of dance. And what I found to be successful is that to really focus on the outcomes of what we're trying to do, whether that be trying to just improve Muslim voter turnout to ensure that our voter propensity increases, and or just focusing not so much so on the activities, because our approach to organizing is much different than the approach that a lot of other folks that are in majority communities, their approach would be. And so for us, we do need to organize in our masajid. We do need to organize in our community centers. We do need to do a lot of qualitative approaches to organizing, which in most cases or in a lot of times is not seen as valuable as the quantitative approach. So
thank you, Brother Muhammad. I want to hear from everyone. I know we have a big conversation and not a lot of time, but let's hear from everyone's voice. Monique, I know you were going to say something.
I was following up. I don't think this group knows that Nariman is actually on my board, so it's hard to follow her. Follow her up. But I will say, so if we're talking about obstacles, and in my mind, I'm thinking obstacles to relationship building, so that when we're in times of crisis, when we're in times of needing to connect funding to need, it's just harder to do. And so taking on my identity as a Black woman, and sometimes the fatigue that I have with teaching my non-people of color what it means, what institutional racism means, what all those things mean to our community, the obstacle for me and some of my colleagues is fatigue. So teaching my staff, now not teaching, I don't have to teach my staff are very great, but thinking about how we engage in a non-offensive, very humbling, let's learn fashion so that we can build those relationships over time is not an obstacle, but it's an opportunity. So I think we just have to take a step back to look at what's keeping us from connecting on a regular basis, whether that's fear, whether that's misunderstanding, whether that's just not knowing where to go for answers. So this forum is awesome because now I know where to go, I know who to call. I know that with funders call on forefront to make connections, what we can do and who the community that we have. So I think the obstacle has really just been the ambiguity that we have about maintaining relationships. And for me, it's just been the history of my own mess getting in the way and needing to get out of it.
I think that's very real and very human. We're talking about, I've heard single story, I've heard trauma, I've heard, resources, lack of resources or capacity. I've heard people just trying to survive. So again, I also think this is a very unique opportunity where we're not trying to survive and we're not coming to each other's door because we're asking for anything other than being seen and understanding one another. So thank you for that. Daniel, did you want to
Yeah,
contribute
I,
to your...
I do want to build on Monique's point, and this ties back to Mohammed's point too. So context, I work in the grant making department for the Chicago Community Trust. My first 6 years, I worked in communications, marketing, development. As I've sort of stepped into grant making for the first time, I'm realizing that I think the critique of of foundation world is that we sometimes get lost and don't understand what business we're in. And what I mean by that is that a lot of grant makers, funders, spend a lot of time behind a desk. They manage systems and processes for RFPs, LOIs, reviews, you name it. And what I'm trying to convey to my team as a leader is that that's important, but what's most important, again, to Monique's point, is building relationships. Like, we're in a relationship business, and if you really want to be a strategic philanthropist, you need to be in community, sort of be on the ground, engaging. Sometimes I get critiqued for spending too much time in spaces like this one, and not trying to design a new rubric to evaluate the next RFP. And full disclosure, that's important work. But what's more important, in my opinion, is for philanthropy to be out there, in community, and in experiences like this, so that we're learning, not just intellectually learning, but connecting with people, and then bringing that back into our work. And again, Mohammed's point about we like to fund themes, activity. I mentioned Tanika because I like to fund people and infrastructure, right? And I trust that the community, if well funded, will do and respond to whatever is needed in their community. But again, philanthropy, is we're trying to evolve. You hear a lot about equity, et cetera, but we need networks like this one to continue to push us.
So Daniel, I'm going to jump in just to highlight that, because I think, again, oftentimes, especially from my perspective, leading American Muslim nonprofits, it has been about survival. It has been about, and anyone who knows me knows, I hate being on a hamster wheel and I hate chasing the dollar. And I say that loud and clear. I have broken organizations down when I feel like their mission is not being driven or they're not clear and we're going after money. But that is also a real factor. And I think that's why these conversations are so important, because what you just said is what I wanted to highlight. Let's create opportunities like this and make this part of the job, right? Not just something we're doing on the side or we're taking away from something, but without doing this, we can never get to the vision of an inclusive American community. And that goes across, I think, our nation. So thank you for that point. We're going to end this session at 1:45, but everybody who is with us today, please feel free to incorporate your questions or your comments in the chat box. We will create a frequently asked questions and we will continue this conversation beyond this session. So feel free to keep commenting and bringing your questions forward. I don't think we're going to get to them, but we will definitely address them and make sure that those answers are available to you, to all of you. So with that, I heard fears, and I know I was feeling fearful as this was going on. And, as we were putting this event together, who will show up, who will do what, and how people will react. So I wanted to ask the next question about harboring fears. Do you harbor any fears that prevent you from engaging or asking critical questions? How would you or your team try and overcome them?
Since I spoke to that, I'll say that I don't know if it's harbor any fears, but the fear of being offensive is always at the top of mind for me with conversations. And so just as in any racial equity conversation, being up to par on my communications, my terminology, understanding race versus religion versus cultural, all those things that seemingly I missed somewhere in civics in 9th grade. So trying to be prepared and honest and true and present is the fear, but not fear of anybody else.
Thank you. Who else wants to jump in there? What fears do you harbor that prevent you from asking critical questions or engaging in open dialogue?
I just want to echo Monique's words, Arshia. I think it's never a fear of the other. SubhanAllah, alhamdulillah, we never fear anyone except Allah. But I think it's the fear of, just again, how it comes off or how you offending someone. But I think what you come to realize through all of our work, whether nonprofit or not, is the reality is being comfortable with yourself and being honest. I think asking, because here's what I've realized is that we don't have answers for all the questions. We don't know everything. And the reality is that I think it's just sometimes the approach and just being honest, being, you don't know how many times I call funders. You don't know how many times I call people and say, listen, I don't understand what you're asking. Can you please clarify? And I think as Muslims, subhanAllah, and just being honest here, because it is safe space, is I think sometimes we're hesitant because we think that we have to have everything perfect or that we have to know everything, or it's because you're afraid that if you ask the funder, then the funder is going to look at you like you don't know what you're doing. That's not the case. Funders love to guide, to support, to mentor, to provide you with those tools and capacity and resources to help you grow. And I think coming out of our own silos and to pick up that phone and call your funder and say, listen, I don't have the capacity. I don't have the right person to do this. I need your help. And just trust yourself, being honest and saying, I don't know it all and I need help. I think funders and those that you're building relationship will definitely respect.
Nurman, I'm going to jump in because I've had a different experience. I've been leading Muslim nonprofit organizations since 2005. I've been director of racial justice, and I've been, I've been asked, how do you make sure your child doesn't become a terrorist? And this was before I had any children. I've applied for grants at numerous organizations, and I've been told, you're an MSA, we don't give to MSAs or Muslim organizations, or we don't give, I'm part of the, so many different spheres, and it's always the no, or we don't want to help Muslim power, or we don't want, so we're picking and choosing. At MLFA, I'm in the sector of national security, and we use the word justice, and I'm always struggling with those words because justice can mean different things to different people. So as much as I, this is a safe space, and I want us to have a bigger conversation and kind of take this beyond just what we want to hear and kind of push the envelope a little bit. What has challenged you that has made you reluctant on kind of showing up and speaking up? And
is it okay if I
go jump? Yes.
I think one of the biggest fears is actually more of an internal fear for me, which is to be in a position where I am in a position to make certain decisions with a funder as kind of like that Muslim representative. And my biggest fear is actually this assimilating to a kind of culture that I lose a part of my identity or a part of who I am just so that I can make a certain amount of money and or bring in a certain amount of money so that I survive. But as I do that, I kind of lose a part of me. So I feel this instance of assimilating versus integrating, where I am proud to be me. I am proud to talk about the issues that are really important to my community without really mincing words, but at the same time also approaching it in a way that fulfills kind of the decorum of that social culture. And when we have a community that is extremely diverse, we're going to have a lot of misses. And so this instance of assimilation versus integration and being consistently cognizant of that and ensuring that we are representative with the social trends as well. I have nothing but respect and love for the people who came before me because they were really the pioneers who made it normal for my name to be spoken in the political scene. They went through all of the most difficult, trials. And I would be remiss without saying that it was my Black brothers and sisters who really made it normal for Muslims to be in this space in that essence. And so this essence of assimilating versus integrating, I would argue, is my biggest fear, especially when I'm in the space of funding.
Thank you, Mohammed. I'm getting a ton of questions, but since we have 15 minutes and I'm watching the clock, I'm going to open this up again and ask all of you to answer this question so that we can all walk away with something tangible, and you have our commitment that these questions are not going on deaf ears. We will respond to them and share them for everyone. So I'd like to hear from every single one of you, from your perspective, what does sustainable, inclusive success look like in philanthropy, in your work with your missions?
Can I
So
start?
just, please go ahead.
Sure, sorry. So, assalamualaikum everyone. My name is Javed Ali, and I'm in the Bay Area. It's an honor to be included in this meeting. So I just want to share a couple of things. From what I've heard, there seems to be a recurring theme of lack of resources. The idea of storytelling and kind of reaching beyond the noise, kind of really reaching the mainstream, and the idea of identity, right? Not losing oneself, not losing one's religion, not losing one's cultural identity. So I've been involved in this work since post 9/11. I used to have the first free and independent press for American Muslims called Ilu magazine. And we told stories and we mainstream stories, which then became talking points, which then ultimately led to policy impact. One of the biggest campaigns that we did, it was the American hijab flag image, and that kind of became this iconic image and a real identity marker that represented, millions of people worldwide. So I think, just from what I'm hearing, it's, those three things seem to be kind of the recurring theme. And the way that we solved it, like when we were doing Ilu magazine, it was very hard for us to raise funding. The community was toxic, right? Nobody wanted to really touch Muslims. And we became really good at telling stories. We became really good at placing stories, telling stories to the community. So that's kind of one thing that we took away from it, but we couldn't raise money. So I ended up parking it. I converted it into a nonprofit. I just parked it and I joined Enterprise. I joined Mainstream, and I started doing product design. So there I learned like all the tools and things in terms of how do we take a product, how do we take an idea and really make it, a successful kind of, and take it to scale to be up to millions of users. So
Sorry, I'm just going to interrupt because this is a panel session and I absolutely want to hear what you say. And I think what you're bringing to the table is very important, but these panelists are kind of leading this session and we have 10 minutes and I'd love to hear from all of them what this is about. But if you don't mind and putting your kind of answers in the chat, all of us can benefit from that. And we will also share them in this conversation.
Sure, no, absolutely. But basically what I was just getting to is, that we have to pivot. I've been on the side of not, hunting for funding and then becoming the funder and then also, continually pivoting in terms of really getting the metrics that the funders want. So, that's something that we can definitely leverage and I'd be happy to talk and explain that.
Feel free to put it in the chat and we'll open the discussion. I know we have a little bit of time and I'd love to hear from these panelists for this session. Thank you again.
Yeah, so just sustainable philanthropy. I think what Daniel was talking about, if there were more foundation officers like Monique and Daniel, I think our jobs would be easier. That's and foundation officers come to this and they really want to do good. I think the key is, I think what sustainable relationship looks like is one where both the nonprofit and the foundation officers see themselves as advocates toward the same cause, the same goals. They're not, and they understand what each other's strengths and weaknesses are. There's something I can learn for sure from somebody who's evaluating proposals all the time. And there's something I can offer in terms of my direct experience. And I think if we see ourselves as advocates, we had a situation with the National Endowment for the Humanities a few years ago where we thought we were going to get a grant. They had invited us to a meeting. Instead, they actually wanted us to work with them on a project. And we didn't end up getting a grant, but it still helped accomplish our mission in a big way. So it was a small step toward a bigger goal.
Thank you, Jawad.
Assalamu alaikum. How are you, Sister Arshia?
I'm gonna
let Monique Samik and
Okay.
Brother Randall. Sorry, this is a panel discussion, so I'm really excited to hear. I'm super
No,
grateful that
it's okay.
everyone's jumping in, and I think that's, kind of speaks to how important this conversation is. But I'm going to pause you just for a bit so we hear from all the panelists, and then we will open it up if we can, or we'll take it on to frequently asked questions. But Salam, thank you. Go ahead, Monique.
Thank you. Just being the representative of the statewide Illinois focus here, both representing grant makers and nonprofits, I think sustainability and success looks like being able to be in continuous relationship when we face things like COVID, when we face global issues that require us to get more one-on-one with each other. So the focus at Forefront is to make sure that we are a solid, permanent statewide organization that continues to make these connections between these two groups and all the allies that go along with it in government and consultants of that nature. So it is my vision that we close the gaps that we have all fallen through during times like this past year, so that we can come together more often and on purpose in building longer term relationships so we know who each other are.
Thank you, Monique.
Hey, I'll add just a few points here. I'm going to go back to my earlier point. I think long-term success, sustainable success, is really about building and supporting the infrastructure that's required for, so quite frankly, healthy civic life in the community level. I think that as I was introduced, you heard that I oversee a portfolio called Building Collective Power. And what we try to do there is sort of support sort of the vital civic infrastructure at the neighborhood level, the organizers, the doers, the conveners, the service providers, like making sure that we make investments so that they are strong and we're not moving from project to project to project. In addition to that, I think long-term sustainable success is all about shifting or redistributing power, particularly from grant maker to grant recipient. Like how do you balance that out so that you create the conditions for, again, as Monique said, that long-term relationship. And one other point I want to make about long-term relationship, and this goes to the issue of impact. I think we have to stop creating these false frameworks around impact. Like if you're really going to address complex issues like poverty, complex issues like immigration reform, complex issues like closing the racial and ethnic wealth gap in this country and most certainly in this city, you're not going to do that in 6, 12, 18-month increments. And so as we think about how we measure our progress, like we have to create the conditions where we're continually moving forward and not penalized for hiccups. So when I'm saying this as a grant maker now, because I've been on the other side as a grant recipient, where you're constantly trying to meet a goal, and that goal takes you away from the longer term objective that your community is demanding you focus on. So again, we have to reimagine, rethink the impact question so that we can actually have a sustained relationship over time.
Thank you, Daniel.
Yeah, I think for when I hear that question, I go back to my earlier point, and sustainability for me is, when funders say diversify your funding stream, I say, and that's a very common word you'll hear, I say diversify your relationships too. Be in as many circles, in many networks, in many, build as many supporters and partners as you can possibly. Strategic partnerships is a form of sustainability in my book. But then again, I also say alongside that is refusing to accept crumbs to serve your community, because the reality is your community is just as important and has the needs and the demands of any other community. And I think if your mission, as long as you don't mission creep, where you're chasing the funding, but you're really making sure that your goal is to fulfill your mission to serve your people on the ground, I think keeping it where being true to yourself, to the mission, and I refuse to accept that we're funding the Muslim community or we're funding the Arab community. I'm bringing you real life stories, you know, poverty, you know, COVID, pandemic issues, unemployment, racial equity. All these issues are no different than my community issues are no different than any other issues. So why should I accept the crumbs? And I think the reality is, to be sustainable, it's just beyond the dollars, and the dollars come with the networks. So I tell the Muslim community, my brothers and sisters, please expand your networks, please expand your relationships, because that is definitely sustainability.
Thank you, Nirman. Brother Muhammad, did you?
No, I think the sister hit it on the head, and I will say, yeah, I mean, I know when not to speak, and I think that everyone gave a lot of great points, and I will say that I think that Brother Randall did make a really good point. I love what he wrote in the chat, so I do think that folks should also read Brother Randall's chat, and the chat is going off. I'm like learning while I'm sitting here. Subhanallah.
It is going off, and I'm trying to stay focused because you know, in this Zoom space, it's easy to get distracted. And I really, you know, I thank everyone for interacting and sharing their thoughts. And we just started something. We have just a minute, but I'd love to hear some closing thoughts from everyone as well. And again, this is not a closing, this is absolutely an opening. So let's kind of hear where we want to take it from here. What does success look like, and how you'd like to end this session?
So I'll just answer one of the questions that popped up, which was somebody said, well, I'm not Muslim. I'm very worried about sounding ignorant when I have questions. As American Muslims, we're used to questions. We understand. Please don't ever hesitate to ask whatever questions. It's the people who don't ask questions and make assumptions that creates a bigger problem. So don't hesitate. You know, we're all learning from each other.
Thank you, and I second that. Closing remarks, just you guys can popcorn.
I would say, you know, this is just like what I'm reading in the chat. Like we have so much in the community, so much experience, so much knowledge. And I think it's just being comfortable with knowing that you don't know, being comfortable with sharing space, being comfortable with uplifting one another. I think someone in the chat actually said something about the mindset of abundance versus scarcity, reactive versus proactive. I mean, I think that these are all mindsets that we have to be intentional about. And I think that we get so comfortable with serving and working and grinding that we don't really spend time to be creative and be intentional and renew our intentions and know and recognize that everyone is doing it for some of the same intentions, subhanAllah. So I think that would be the last thing for me.
Thank you. Daniel?
First of all, the chat was very, very helpful, and I'm learning a lot. And we need to lift that up. You know, I'm thinking about coalition. I'm thinking about this learning journey, which is absolutely critical. It's not critical just because we want to, as philanthropists, better support this complex community. We want to do that, yes, but we also want to make sure that we're building representative and robust, strong coalitions to really have a fighting chance at driving reform, right? I think about the Sam Cooke's song that was rendered at the top of this meeting. If we're really going to have lasting change that lifts up our communities, like we need to be in coalition, and to be in coalition, we have to know one another, right? For the principle of Ubuntu to be present, we have to see one another and put ourselves in relationship with one another. And again, so I'm thinking about that as an outcome. Like if we do this right, we'll have stronger coalitions downstream.
That's perfect. So I think that leaves Monique.
Got a little sidetracked because someone was asking how to save the chat. Click those 3 little dots and download the chat.
Guys, we have an amazing team recording and writing, and that's why I'm staying focused, because you know all of this is being recorded and we will definitely answer these questions. This is not a closing, it's an opening. And this is the launch, but this is the year of learning. So we are intentfully engaging in relationship together today with each other. So please keep that intent there. That is why we are here. So I'll pass it back to you, Monique, for some closing remarks for this panel.
This has been a great panel. It's been a great experience. And so being only on my job for about 6 to 7 weeks, I am eager to learn more, eager to stay engaged, and in this role, making sure that I am connecting the dots between our community members, not as a funder, not as a nonprofit, as a person, as a human being doing the work on the ground. So thank you for being here. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of this panel, and I look forward to continuing to work.
Thank you so much.
And I'll just say, Archia, that, you know, for all of us, I think all of us do such a beautiful job in our own line of work. And I think as nonprofits, and I know it sounds like it sounds like a cliche when I say own the narrative, tell the story, reach out to, you know, funders. A lot of funders honestly don't know. And, you know, nonprofits at the end of the day are businesses. So it's your job to reach out and educate others about what you do and your mission. And that hopefully that will definitely reach success. So with that, thank you for this great opportunity, everyone, and love being on the panel, Monique, Joed, and Daniel, and all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you all for being here. I think some of the themes we can close out with is we heard about showing up, about owning our belonging. We heard about not letting our fears stop us, but to use those fears to channel change and to build relationships. We heard about changing paradigms, and we heard about, looking at a greater vision, not just for our organizations, but as a community, as a people, as a nation. So there's lots of good discussion here that will come forward. Thank you all for being here with me today and giving me this opportunity to spend this time with you. It was my honor and pleasure, and I look forward to working with all of you on the ground and this year of learning and in our lives. So thank you, and I'll give it back to Delara or Norma.
I just want to thank everybody for being here. If you're just joining us, welcome to the Muslims in America, a learning launch for the philanthropic community. The program updates and agenda links are in the chat bar. We also want to thank our generous partners and sponsors that will be in the chat bar as well. And then we want to acknowledge a couple of important generous sponsors. So I'm going to, if everyone, there's like a 5-minute intermission, and then we're going to get right into experiencing these wonderful breakouts and exploration of cultural experience and exploration. So if you all would just bear with me for a few more minutes, and all righty, I'm going to share my screen here.
30 years, Amana Mutual Funds have provided halal investment vehicles serving the unique needs of the Muslim community. Discover how you can align your investments with your principles in a retirement, health, or education savings account, or invest for Hajj. To obtain this and other important information in a prospectus or summary prospectus, please visit amanafunds.com or call toll-free 1-888-732-6262. Please read the prospectus and consider an investment's objectives, risks, charges, and expenses carefully before investing. Investing involves risk, including possible loss of principal. The Amana funds limit the securities they purchase to those consistent with Islamic principles. This limits opportunities and may affect performance.
Spiritual legacy of Muhammad is love. I mean, it's what he's done all of his life, and that is the message of Islam.
My name is Fatin Saifullah. I'm from Las Vegas. I've been a resident imam of Masjid Al-Sabur for the last 18 years.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Corey Majid, and I am a Muhammad Ali scholar.
When I'm able to stand before you all and say that I'm a graduate, I graduated with my master's. It's not just me graduating. It wasn't just me in the classroom. It was me and my community.
Part 3 is coming up in just a couple of minutes. Please, on the chat, what you're going to see is our 4-part session today. Part 1 was all about sharing stories and telling about, sharing a little bit about American Muslims. Part 2, what does success look like? And now part 3, we're going to go into breakout rooms and have a cultural immersion. Join a breakout room where Muslim comedians talk about how they do their, how they practice their craft, how Muslim documentary leaders shared their craft. and how Muslim-led organizations tell the narrative in a variety of creative ways.
In choosing to study at Zaytuna College, you'll quickly discover a design and a provident plan in everything you learn. You'll set your sights on nothing less than a true liberal arts education. God willing, when our efforts and yours come to fruition, we will proudly number you among the ranks of Zaytuna alumni whose social commitment betters a beleaguered world. The promise of a liberal arts education awaits you at Zaytuna College.
Thank you all. So we are going to get ready to move right into our introductions to our cultural experience and exploration. We have a wonderful speaker with us who will be joining us.
Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. May God's peace, mercy, and blessings be with you today. And I begin in the name of God, the most compassionate and most merciful, and acknowledging that I'm coming to you from Manhattan, a land that has traditionally been stewarded by the Lenape people. And if you're interested in learning more about the Lenape people and the land in which they occupy, please check out the lenapecenter.org. I want to thank the organizers for inviting me to be here with you today and just give a brief introduction to set up a really wonderful set of breakout rooms and talking about cultural experience and exploration. So my name is Hussein Rashid. I am a professor of Islamic studies. I teach at a place called the New School. I'm also a consultant that works with cultural institutions, including foundations, creatives, and non-governmental organizations to deal with Muslims in American popular culture, which is the area of my research. In addition, I also work on Muslim Shi'i justice theologies. And some of you may recognize some of the work I've done, especially if you've been in Chicago. The picture you see on the screen is from an exhibit called America to Zanzibar, Muslim Cultures Near and Far, which is a project I consulted on and which came to the Sabeel Center in Chicago, I think just about 20 months ago. So some of you may be familiar with that as well. I want to start by really thinking about what the goals are of this session that we've been invited to talk about today. And thinking about this is a session, a day about education and understanding, about creating an action towards change from this education and this understanding, and thinking about how that change has long-term impact. And I think for me, part of that conversation and part of where culture fits in is thinking about the assets we bring to the table, right? I tend to think both theologically and, as a person of faith, and as an intellectual orientation in terms of asset-based thinking. What do we have at the table that we can bring to the conversation? What are we not paying attention to that we can lift up? Or how can we think about things differently? And for me, I think cultural production allows us to engage with some of that. Cultural production is a carrier of memory, both personally and communally. Right? When we think about the backgrounds that some of us have on right now, why are we using geometric patterns? What does this have to do with our history as Muslims? Why are we using it now in the 21st century in a virtual Zoom call? What are the things that this elicits? So what are our personal and what are communal memories that are brought forth in terms of our cultural production? Then we also have to think about cultural production as a statement of our ethics and our values. Right? Nobody creates something that is antithetical to who they are, either as an individual or as a community. So every time we create, whether it is music, whether it is a building, whether it is a film or a painting or a play or a novel or a poem, what are the ethics and values that are expressed through that cultural production, even to the very way we dress? How does that tell people who we are? And how do we understand ourselves through that particular expression? And how do other people understand us? And finally, we have to think about cultural production as a heritage and an endowment, a trust, and a foundation. And here I'm using these words intentionally because I think the multivalent meaning for us is very important. They are a trust, they are something in our care, they are a foundation for the ways in which we build, but they are also the trust, they're also the things that carry us forward. Right? They are the amana that we are entrusted with, but we are also the amana that is entrusted within there. That is, we are the thing that carries this cultural production forward. But if it is seriously, if our cultural production is seriously a carrier of memory, seriously a statement of our ethics and values, then it has to be something that carries us forward as well. It is our legacy. And so I think we need to think about cultural production very seriously in that way, just beyond object and product. And I'm using cultural production because I think it's a way to think very broadly. You know, we don't often think about the ways in which we make prayer beads as part of cultural production. But sometimes these distinctions between religion and culture are very arbitrary and don't necessarily fit within our worldviews. And so what are the conditions in which cultural production happens? We can talk about cultural production happening in adversity. And here I think very much about the history of Muslims in the United States and thinking about how everything that we describe as unique, as culture unique to the United States, owes itself to Black culture in the United States. So whether we think about music and the relationship of the enslaved Muslims who had the sound of the adhan, or the sound of West African cultural systems that transformed into the blues and R&B and jazz, or we think about the banjo, or we think about barbecue, all of that has its history. These things that are particularly US art forms have their origin and their points of storytelling in marginalized communities, and communities that come out of adversity, and particularly Black communities in this country. As scholar Dr. Suad Abdul Khabir says in her book Muslim Cool, quote, like, where does culture come from? It comes from people who don't have much. The flip side of it is, historically, that we also know cultural production comes out of patronage. It comes out of royal courts. It comes out of wealthy individuals who commission art. It comes out of people wanting to see beauty in the world and saying, I will put it forward in the world, and I will enable other people to put it forward out in the world. And in the middle, of course, are the artists who create for the sake of creating. But how do we create, or what is that ecosystem that allows this cultural production to represent who we are and the varieties of ways in which we can express who we are? How does that ecosystem come about? What are the components of that ecosystem? And here I come back to our asset-based model, which is, what do we have in our community already? What do we already have access to that allows us to build this ecosystem, and what are the components of that ecosystem? So I start thinking about the ecosystem, first and foremost, thinking about our creators. Who are our creators? How are we enabling our creators? How are we making sure that there is resources, and those resources don't necessarily have to be monetary, time, material, space, right, to be able to create? How do we do that? How do we make sure creators are in contact with one another? How do we make sure that they're generating something new, that they feel refreshed and energized and engaged? Where are our curators? With all the work that is coming out, and there is quite a bit of it, how do we curate this in order to tell a bigger story? And here, when I say curators, I don't mean telling us, oh, this is good and this is bad, right? Everybody's story is worth telling. If a piece of culture is created, it is worth telling because somebody felt the need to create it. When I say curators, what I mean is, how do we have people who think holistically or synthetically? How do you say, let's look at this piece of art and this other piece of art and this piece of art, and let's tell a different story bringing these pieces of art as well? That's still creative, but it is also taking other people's creation and thinking in different ways. And that brings us to our thinkers, who are not just curators, but are also the people who can tell us the scope and the history and think about where this may go, right? We are past the point, we all know this, we've been in the field long enough, that telling people the truth about Muslims is no longer an effective way to counter Islamophobia. Now we need narratives, and we need particular narratives. We don't need narratives of Muslims as the superhero protagonist who does no wrong, because that's as unbelievable as the constantly evil Muslim. We need stories that tell us in our old humanity, but that comes out of media studies, that comes out of pop culture studies. We need people who are thinking about these issues, who are engaging with some of the theories and looking at our practice and thinking about how that moves us forward. We need, of course, our patrons. We need our patrons, the people who believe that art is worth doing, the individuals who come forward and say our art is worth doing, and how do we make it happen? and we need our funders. And our funders are slightly different than patrons. Patrons are at the individual level. Funders are, of course, at the corporate or institutional level. I think many of the people involved in this project here today would very clearly fall into the funders category. Maybe we have some patrons as well. But I will tell you, coming back to the museum exhibit I mentioned earlier, the reason it got off the ground is because there was an institutional belief on the part of the museum who found patrons to fund the project. And then we got funders in, some of whom are on this call, the Doris Duke Foundation for Islamic Art, Pillars Foundation, Al-Hibri Foundation, the National Endowment for the Humanities, who then came in and said, this is something now that is for a greater good. And so who were able to bring this forward and deliver on this. And then we need conveners. How do you get the creators and the curators and the thinkers and the patrons and the funders all come together? And I think that this is what today's our hosts today have done for us. They are the conveners who brought together all these wonderful people and really trying to think very forward in terms of how do we build up from here. And I want to thank them for that opportunity, both for myself personally and for the community that gathered here today, in order to help us think about what does cultural production look like, not only historically and not only in the present, but in the future, that allows us to say, yeah, how do we get a good laugh and tell a story and make a social impact? How do we educate and understand? How do we create action for change that has a generational impact, not just a yearly impact or a monthly impact? So with that, I want to thank you and turn it over to my dear sister, Janan Mahajer from the Interfaith Youth Corps.
Thanks, Hussein. Hussein's like my big brother, so I'm really happy to follow his presentation. My name is Janan Mahajer. I'm from the Interfaith Youth Corps, and I'm gonna pause while you, right, so you can all see me. There we go. Welcome everyone to part 3, which is the cultural experiences of today's parts. Thank you, Hussein, for that. I'm really excited that I get to be the voice that introduces you all to the different options that you have in this particular section. Before we take a look at the different breakout rooms that we could choose from, just wanted to quickly recenter the different parts that we've been through today. So we started this morning with part 1, with our story, with where we come from, how we all intersect in our experiences. We followed up with a great discussion with our panelists on what success looks like. And we're here in part 3 now to really think about what cultural experiences are and what are different ways that Muslim communities and Muslim cultures in the United States show up in all of these spaces. There's a Chicago poet by the name of Gwendolyn Brooks who said, "True, there is silver under the veils of darkness, but few care to dig in the night for the possible treasure of stars." And I hope that as you go into these breakout rooms, you are seeing some of the stars that we are highlighting in this conversation, and hope that you all spend time together and learn from these amazing folks. Thank you.
15, so we're gonna kind of just squeeze in a couple more minutes here. So if you all can continue to stay with us, we have a wonderful last 2 sessions here, and looking forward to introducing part 4, relationship building and digging deeper with new colleagues and friends. And so I'm so excited to welcome Kalia.
Thank you so much, Norma, and thank you to Dilara and Dilnaz and Ruhi and Rima and all of the organizers and the incredible planning committee who's been working on this. And really, especially thank you to everybody who's come today with an open mind and an open heart and willingness to fully engage and participate. And what a day it has been. And I think there's always something, you know, we should be kind of used to this kind of virtual gathering by now, but there is definitely something about coming together in person. So what we hope to do in this next session is give a taste of that, you know, really have everyone have that. I know for me, I love conferences, I love the panel sessions, but the real like juicy stuff happens in those one-to-one conversations when you sit at a table and you break bread with somebody. So we are, you know, going to do our best to create that kind of space right now and allow everyone to digest what they've learned today, what they're still processing, and thinking about how we can take, you know, these learnings and eventually get them to action. But right now for today, we want to focus on this relationship building, thinking about what we've learned together today, you know, just what Petra was able to share with us just about who Muslims are and really, you know, setting that ground level, thinking about what success does look like and what it can look like, hearing from people who have worked with funders or who are funders themselves and thinking about what are these practices that, where can we fix? As a funder and grant maker, I'm always thinking about what is it that I can do differently in my relationships with my grantee partners. And so I really appreciated that session as well. And then this cultural immersion, I know I'm seeing from the chat that was very rich and fulfilling for everyone as well. And so this part is that culmination and really getting to break down and still process what you've heard and what you've learned with smaller groups. And so I want to ask for 3 questions. I have a 4th that I'm going to add, but they're going to show up in the chat. So one, just, as you're thinking, if the conversation just opens us up to more like organic conversation, great. But if you're finding that you need prompts, here you go. There's number 1, what new learning are you taking with you from this day? Number 2, what questions might you still have about anything you've heard today, about American Muslim organizations, about communities, about the work that Muslim-led organizations are doing? This is a time to really be real. We've had several opportunities today to say like, no, no fear, just ask the questions that you have and don't be shy. And number 3, on this learning relationship, and this journey and this year of learning, what are some specific or a specific concrete next step that you might take in terms of changing your practices? And then the 4th one I'm adding, because I'm looking past my computer at snowfall and sunshine. So I'm thinking about how I'm feeling today, externally looking at this beautiful scenery, but also thinking about internally, like what is the weather like inside for you? So right now, I think I'm feeling that mix of coziness and just such optimism and sunshine from everything that we've heard today. So I would add that as an offering to your conversation. So think about personally, how are you feeling about this inside as we're all hunkered down? Most of us are hunkered down from the snow. So with that, I will wrap up, but thank you so much for inviting me to play this role in transitioning us. And I'm really excited for your conversations to come.
Right, everyone, thank you so much for coming back. My name is Rima Kamran, and I'm the co-founder of the Illinois Muslim Civic Coalition, and I am very proud, along with my other co-founder, Dilara Saeed, to be a co-convener of the Year of Learning, launching today, February the 18th. The Year of Learning was inspired by the indigenous community who pioneered a day of learning with foundations, and we build on their efforts and that of those community leaders before us. We came together with 3 goals in mind, and I'm going to be sharing my screen to show those to you. It was education and awareness, action towards change, and long-term impact. As it was mentioned, we are here in the spirit of collaboration and partnership with the intention to build together. We started our day off, our program today, with inspiring song and sacred words. These grounded us spiritually. And then we delved into compelling data from the Institute of Social Policy and Understanding. We shared our stories and our places within our American experiences. We had an exciting panel to talk about what success looks like and the challenges and the opportunities ahead, with so much more conversation that needs to take place beyond today. We delved into cultural experiences through art, entertainment, film, comedy, and the African American legacy. And finally, we came together to build and strengthen relationships with each other through some critical questions. And as we're here, I'm sure you're thinking, what's ahead? What's next for the Year of Learning? And here we are. We ask you to look ahead with us. You built some relationship today, and that was our goal, to provide the foundation that we can then build upon. We hope that you take this opportunity with those that you met and continue ongoing virtual connections. We will be sharing a directory of attendees with you where you were asked to opt in during your registration. We invite you to have virtual coffees with those that you've met today. And as we share calendars of events for partners and allies, we invite you to collaborate with each other and learn from the upcoming events. Coming ahead, you will see that all throughout the year, we have some exciting events that are coming into formation. We ask you to save the date for April 21st for the Year of Learning executive session, with a sector convening being planned, including cultural exploration and networking in July, along with some exciting opportunities to get together again in August and October. But we will need your help for this portion. We ask for your help to please help to fill out the survey so that we can think about what is helpful as well as what you'd like to see more of. Reflect on the goals for the Year of Learning and help us determine what the next steps should be by filling out the survey. The survey link will be provided in the chat box for you right now, as well as will be emailed to you at a later time. I also wanted to share with you the Year of Learning. I also wanted to share an exciting resource that we want that is available on the website. So in the chat box, you will see. Let me just get rid of this. You will see the link to our resources that have been put together. On the website, yearoflearning.org, you will see a resource page. The resource includes some great opportunities for you to learn about general information about Muslims in America, demographics, historical context, as well as the Muslim story. There's also some great opportunities to quickly see some fast things you should know about American Muslims. And each of those are hyperlinked to great resources that you can explore deeper. We also have a video gallery of American Muslim information, as well as infographics that have been provided from many of our partner organizations. For funders supporting Muslim communities, there are some recommendations that have been put together, and we invite you to please look through these. This resource is an ongoing one. We will continue to add to this page, and we ask you and request that you continue to visit to get regular updates. As a reminder, please follow the conversation on Twitter and Facebook, and please do take the survey so we can get your feedback and incorporate it into the upcoming Year of Learning. We ask you to share this information with others, and I will give it back to Delara to hear back from the conveners as we close out.
Great. Thank you on behalf of the sponsors and conveners. Each of us will just briefly give a statement. We'd love to also hear from you. And if you would just put in the chat as you're walking away, something that you would have said or someone else said in the last breakout on what you're doing to change, what you're doing to move forward with your organization. Thank you on behalf of our conveners, and we hope that the goals for today were ones that you were hoping that we would achieve, and that the work ahead is something that you will join us in. I give it to Hilesh and Dilnaz.
Thank you so much, Delara. Thank you so much, Rima, and the entire team. We couldn't have done this without our entire team. It's important to realize we've been working on this since November, and we're excited about this journey that we're going to take together in 2021. It was very powerful to have these breakout rooms and to hear how Muslim Americans have a narrative, and we're owning our narrative. We're unapologetically Muslim, and we're going to use these conversations to build this deeper Muslim American community throughout the year of 2021. So we're excited to see you guys coming with us in April and the year beyond.
Could you raise your hand if you're a part of the planning committee? Because there's an amazing group of people across the nation. 40 members of the planning committee, including UIC's team, and then the conveners.
Les, would you like to wrap it up? wrap it up for us as well?
Sure. I just am thinking about everything, and how I entered the space. In that first conversation when we were talking about our journeys, I talked about how my first language, I was born in East Africa in Dar es Salaam, was Swahili. And in Swahili, as with many other languages, sometimes goodbye and hello weave into each other. And a wave goodbye could be a gesture of greeting. So I want you to think about how you entered the space as you think about how you're leaving. And I want you to think about what you will carry as you think about what will linger and what will sneak up on you later on today. Because this is not just about one day, this is about, and it's not just about, I know I started off saying civic collaboration and civic partnerships. This is really about what's going to linger and last longer. And that's what relationship building is all about. So we're grateful that you're all in this space, but we're also grateful that this is going to continue and we're going to get to talk to you more and we're going to get to grow with you. So with that, I'll turn it back to Norma.
Thank you all so much for being with us today. And I think we're just going to add a couple more thank yous in the chat and run our thank yous for our sponsors. And be sure to look out for the survey information, some post information that you'll be getting from me as we wrap up the details and the recording of this video as well. Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you. Assalamu alaikum.